Hey, welcome everybody and those tuning on YouTube. We're happy to have you. This is my first time doing this, so I'm kind of new. And yeah, today we're having our information interview with Passion Impact. I'm Kayla Fu.
And I'm Stefan Pearls.
All right. Okay, so let's go over to the outline of this, how this whole thing is going to go out. So we're starting right now at 4:05, overview, give me your overview. Okay, and then at 4:10, we'll start the interview. We'll have the professionals get interviewed and talk about anything. And then, so we're changing it up today. So today we're going to have students ask along the way, asking questions instead of having a little time for them to ask. We're going to so you get to ask the professionals while we interview them. So feel free to raise your hand and everything like that. Yeah. At 4:55, we'll wrap up and start reflections. And at 5 is when we'll be done. Yeah. All right. Here are some of our generous sponsors with this whole corona situation going on. If you can't help, please do. Spread the word. There's always something you can do. Oh,
yeah. All right. In terms of expectations for this meeting, we want to make sure that we show gratitude and respect for all those in the video chat. So if you do get a chance to ask a question, make sure that you are respectful of everybody else. And you are currently muted by the facilitator. In this case, it's Adriana, the bouncer. And she can unmute you when you raise your hand. So therefore, if you have a question, what you'll do is you'll raise your hand, and then you'll introduce yourself and your pronouns. So if you don't know how to raise your hand, if you look at the bottom where it says participants, and then there's a little button that says raise your hand. If everybody could do that right now just to make sure that you know how to raise your hand. Nice, nice, awesome. Wow, kicking butt. This is way faster than, love it. Oh, great. Both the Bens have questions too, awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, coming back here, no nudity, vulgar or demeaning language, or inappropriate sharing of your screen will be tolerated. Passion Impact does reserve the right to remove any individual from our programs, and we are very serious about that. But in all seriousness, have fun and stay engaged. With that being said, Ben Scheiner is joining us. Now, Ben graduated from Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. He's a software engineer based here in Portland, Oregon, developed applications that control massive robots. He's set up large Wi-Fi networks, and he creates and uses data visualization to help important people make better decisions. Currently, he's working on open source websites that help conservation scientists study endangered animals such as whales, giraffes, and manta rays. And of course, he's passionate about ultimate frisbee.
All right, Ben Whitehead. Grew up in Boise, Idaho, graduated with a degree in mathematics from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, our main land. Started working with software junior year of college when he took on random contracts and projects. He was hired full-time and works as a software engineer in the field of financial research. Has recently worked on a platform that helps to prevent fraud in online transactions. And he is very passionate about efficiency and culture.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Yeah, welcome Ben and Jerry. I mean, Ben. We're happy to have you here today. Is there anything you want to add on for yourself? A little bit of what you guys do for a living would be awesome. Let's start with Ben S.
Yeah, there's nothing I really want to add on, but I would maybe, to put a little bit more context to those bullet points. I've been doing this for about 5 years, and before that, I was kind of working in the economics field. I was working for the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. And before that, I started in college with a math major and an econ major.
Nice. Yeah, for myself, just studied math and computer science at Lewis and Clark. I don't think I need to add anything necessarily aside from, I think the thing that first got me into software was just the ability to help other people solve problems with technology and kind of let them know the world about let the world know about their business or whatever by building a website for them. That's kind of how I got started in this, was by just helping small businesses build websites, update their website, fix their problems on the web, basically.
All right, yeah, that sounds great. So let's just start from the beginning with yourself in high school, since like mainly most of our viewers are like high school students, including me. All right, so originally, were you guys planning on becoming software engineers from the beginning, or just like, oh, you just got into this one, like, oh, you went into like English, like, and then you're like, oh, I don't like English, ew. So you went into software, like, kind of stuff. Where did it start?
Yeah, it's funny. I was always like thinking back to high school, I was always sort of like a computer, like a bit of a nerd, I guess. Like I was spending time on the computer, but like mostly I'd read Wikipedia. I never programmed in high school. And then in college, I wanted to be an econ major, so I didn't really, it wasn't on my radar. Um, but just kind of the way the world is getting, if you're interested in other things, if you're interested in science, if you're interested in math, then you might be asked to code this or that at some point. And so that just kind of happened to me again and again. And then when I was at the Federal Reserve in DC, my job was basically to help economists. And mostly what they wanted help with was coding. And about a year and a half into that job, I realized I don't like the economics, I like the coding. And so for me, it was sort of born out of doing it out of habit or out of necessity for a while, and then realizing that's what I was really into.
Yeah, for me as well. I think when I was in high school, I thought that I might try to study medicine or something in college. I was very focused on like math and science, but mostly like biology and anatomy and that kind of stuff. When I started to go to college, I just kept taking more math classes. Didn't really take as many lab science classes. Then started learning how to program. I mean, I knew how to do like web design, a little bit of web, HTML and like JavaScript when I was in high school. But aside from that, like I didn't really learn how to program in like C or anything like that until college, like my CS1 class. So that's when I kind of started, and then just kept learning more and more about it, figuring out how to get better at it, and getting paid to do it eventually was nice.
Yeah, so just basically it's going from like just it happening. Like I don't think like you just never really saw it, right? So you kind of just winged it and all that. So did you like do any online like researching or about opportunities that you could help get in to like what you are doing now, or like like that, something like that? Like any opportunities that you like took, like interning or like just any of that stuff?
I think that for what I do, the best way to start is super simple. It might just be like, I really wish this website existed and it doesn't, so I'm gonna make that website. Or like my like friend's dad has a restaurant and he's willing to pay me like $100 or $500 if I'm willing to make a website of like, you know, some simple like menu or something. You know, like start small and then just use Google. Like, how do I make a website on Google? You'll find like, you know, links that show you a lot of information, and it'll be overwhelming at first. It's a big world out there, and like, you know, doing this professionally for 5 years, I definitely have no idea what I'm doing like 90% of the time. A lot of actually creating these things is about persistence. It's about reading and learning, and ultimately realizing that like, okay, there's a whole bunch of information in front of my face right now. I should be feeling overwhelmed, but instead I'm just going to start small and understand this little bit and move on to the next bit and try to make something happen.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. When you just get started, I think you kind of learn about how to like market your own skills and things like that. You create a portfolio of the websites that you've created in the past, and you kind of like just keep trying bigger things. There's definitely a lot of times that I've taken on projects that I have no idea how I'm going to implement it. You know, like most of the time I just kind of think like, well, anything's possible. It's just amount of time that, you know, you have to put into making something. So a lot of it is unknowns and just being willing to face that and not be afraid or anything like that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to do that. Like, we're like in like the summer internship for Passion Impact. Actually, we're gonna get to like build our own website to our portfolio, which is pretty awesome. But I'm really interested about that. And so here's a question: what's something you wish you knew when trying to figure out what was next for you after high school? Just going back to that question. Just going back to that.
Did you have something, Ben? I feel like you have something on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think about that because I don't think I have any regrets or anything of anything that I did in college. So I think as long as you kind of keep your eyes open, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Like keep your eyes open to new opportunities and learn how to kind of market yourself and like your own skills. That helps a lot because then you can, like even my freshman year of college, I just created like a little business for like a tutoring service. Like I would go out and tutor kids math, go to their house, teach high schoolers math, things like that. You can advertise, you can spread the word about certain services and things that you want to offer. And I think people, I think when you're in high school, it takes you don't necessarily know how to put yourself out there, but I think that that's probably the biggest thing is like, just figure out how to put yourself out there and get feedback from people as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. My words would be sort of in the same lines is talking to people who know more than you and really trying to get them to sort of mentor you and get you started will save you a lot of time down the road. And, even if you find yourself in a position where you know more than they do about a particular topic, being respectful about that and trying to teach instead of lecture is, I think, a really important skill because, I know more than many of my colleagues about A, B, and C, but they know much more than me about X, Y, and Z. So if I'm not a fun person to be around when I am the person who knows, knows how to do what I'm good at, then ultimately I'm not going to be able to progress and develop because they're not going to want to teach me. So I think that I think programming is something that people often think of as being like, you're stuck in the little hole, like doing your thing and you just like need to like figure it out and no one else should be involved. But in reality, it's a very social thing. You're going to have, the customer, someone who's like expecting you to build something for them, and you're going to have to interact with them. You're going to have to interact with your teammates and other programmers. And so I think being a friendly social person is really important.
Definitely very important. I think like there's a lot of, stereotypes out there about software engineers and how like they don't talk, or like programmers, that they're not really social people. I definitely have to talk with people every single day. Even today, working from home, everybody's working from home, but we still have to get on physical calls, and like get feedback from each other, so that we know how to build what the customer wants.
I got a quick question on that one. It's pretty apparent when going into an interview that the hiring manager has specific line items to hire for. And after having been in multiple interviews, there's an idea that like, it's not just about the hard skills, but it's about the soft skills. How do you interact with other people? So I'm curious, again, going back to high school and kind of working through your college time, what are some of the soft skills that you developed outside of your education, maybe outside of programming, that you think have actually lended to you getting these jobs and progressing in your professional realms? And let's start with Ben Scheiner.
The number one thing that I would caution people about is to have a personality where it seems like you know it all. When I hire people, oftentimes if I ask them a difficult question, my very favorite answer will be to have them say, I don't know. Because in an interview, there can be a lot of pressure to know, you might feel like you're inadequate if you don't know the answer that someone's talking about. But really, oftentimes I'll ask people questions that don't even make sense. seeing if they're going to try to like, wiggle their way into like some kind of like answer that's kind of crazy, and like make it seem like they know what they're talking about, or will they actually be humble and be like, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about that. And so I think that skill of just trying to, social situations will often make you feel, like I said, inadequate, anxious, like feeling like you're out of your league. And when you're in those situations, being able to answer honestly and think about like, what do I actually know? And maybe you actually know the answer, but oftentimes those emotions will get in the way of being correct. And this is a field where being correct is often really important. It's a lot less dangerous to hire someone who says they don't know than to hire someone who says, I do know, and then have them be wrong. So that for me is a very critical skill that a lot of people wouldn't think about.
Thanks, Ben. And Ben Whitehead, what about you?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that before too. Many times during interviews, you'll see somebody that is like very strong-headed. They think they know the answer to something that might not even make sense. And people definitely throw those kind of questions out there. That's the other thing, is if you are interviewing, you should be aware that they might just be testing, your humility, or like how humble you are. So your humility. So keep that in mind for sure. I think that one of the bigger things though, that like I think you had mentioned basically like what's something that, has helped you develop these soft skills. I think one thing for me definitely was, I played a lot of Frisbee in the past, played on a lot of like sports teams, just knowing how to work as a team and, maybe even some leadership tendencies that come from that. But also I would say even more importantly, like, just knowing how to keep everybody on your team up and active and like in a good mindset. And like when you give them feedback, you're not berating them. You're like trying to inspire, your team to do better than it did last week or whatever, in the last sprint or whatever, your cadence is. So I think, yeah, just like general like team skills are really important for a good software engineer.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah. If anyone has like questions, you can go ahead and just write it in the chat, because we're opening up questions throughout the interview. But for my question is, like, since we're talking about hiring and all that stuff, what's on your resume and why? What's important?
So I have a take on resumes that's a little bit non-traditional. The one thing that is traditional and is, I think, pretty universal advice for programmers is that there's much more of an emphasis on the skills that you have when you start out than on the specific places that you worked. So, if someone has done like a project for a class, and they used Python and MATLAB, then that person is skilled in Python and MATLAB, and those are things that belong on your resume. Oftentimes recruiters are looking for particular little niches, particular little boxes in the coding world, and they're looking for people who have those things on their resume. So if you want to get an interview, sometimes it's worth it to just have the right words on your resume. For me, I know there's a lot of advice out there that I think it's more pointed at people working in other careers, where you want to say like, I did this and that caused revenue to increase 400% or something. Like for me, if I see that on a resume, that's a real red flag, because that's probably, just someone taking advice about what they think that other people should hear. Really, I think a resume for programming might just say, here's what I did, here's something I struggled with, and here's what we accomplished.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, my resume, I think just specifically says, you know, kind of like the companies I've worked at in the past, the projects I've done, the like links to the code for those projects. If you've done any sort of like open source contributions, things like that, I tend to put them in. And then also just like the straight up software technologies that I've used in the past, you know, which is a lot. So I don't need to list them all here, but I think that the general idea is basically just like anything that you think somebody else might value, I guess, like you want to throw it on there because that might show up in a search result or, you know, anything like that. So
I see. Okay, so we have some questions from our viewers here. All right, so Cameron says, what are your primary languages for programming? Which language would you say you find the most useful for your work?
Oh, you want to go first, Ben? Or
Sure. Either way. I mostly work in JavaScript. So the JavaScript is what people tend to use when they're building websites. You will also hear the words HTML and CSS thrown around. Those are sort of three, that's sort of like the holy trinity of web development. So if you want to make a website, you'll need to have some knowledge of all three, but that doesn't necessarily make it harder than doing something else. You go ahead, Ben.
yeah, so I actually don't work as much like doing web development anymore as like just data, I guess like back-end engineering is what it's primarily called. And that basically has to do with basically passing data around to various applications so that they can act on it in a specific way, like in real time or whatever. Not like front-end web development as much. So my primary languages for that, I've done a lot of PHP in my life. My main language now though is actually, it's called Golang, and it's developed by Google, I think in like 2007 or 2008. And I've been working in that for just a couple of years now since I've been at this most recent company. And it's definitely my favorite programming language. It's kind of like C for the web, I think, is kind of how you would maybe classify it. It's strongly typed, and you know, you have to define everything basically as you go. But I've done a lot of JavaScript, HTML, CSS, PHP. Yeah.
Yeah,
MySQL is also probably the most important one because that's how you interact with like databases. So like if you ever want to have like a live updating, you know, website or dynamic website that's based on the content that other users submit or whatever, you're going to have some way of storing that data, probably in a database. That's what MySQL or PostgreSQL, any of these SQL variants are for.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I don't know any of that because I'm not really into like coding and stuff, but it sounds really cool. And so Christina she asks, is coding for everyone or does it take a type of person? That's a good question.
I actually do think that anybody definitely can learn how to code, and I would recommend it not from like a everybody needs to know how kind of thing, but like I think you might, once you get like kind of the basics down, I think you might have a better understanding about how a lot of the things that you use on a daily basis actually work, like the apps and stuff that you use. You might realize like, oh, well, this is why it's not working or whatever, you know. So that's kind of yeah, that's kind of important, I think, or could be interesting to people. Aside from that though, I think I think it takes a type of person to be a software engineer. I don't think it takes a type of person to be like a coder though. Like to do it full time, yeah, you want to be kind of like a critical analytical style person, but there are a lot of people that also, you know, like designers and stuff like that too. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily limited by that kind of mentality either. So
I'm thinking about like, what about cooking? Like, is cooking for everyone, or is there a certain type of person that should cook? And I think the answer is very similar. Anyone can do it. But ultimately, I think how successful you are is there something you want to create, and is that going to motivate you to keep getting better?
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. So since you guys have like so much, like you guys been doing this for like a long time, I bet. Like, what's the coolest thing you've ever built? Like, as in, yeah, as a software engineer, of course.
I guess I can start. Right now, I basically work on a platform that does fraud basically in real time. So if you buy something on like paypal.com, they will send us the data associated with that transaction. And we kind of make a recommendation on whether or not we think it's like you using your credit card or somebody else trying to use your credit card like on your behalf online. So it's kind of interesting because like then they will take that recommendation and say like, okay, do we want to approve or deny this transaction? It's not on Visa. When you buy something online, the credit card company doesn't do like the fraud guarantee. It's like on the merchant themselves. So if you buy something on like Best Buy, PayPal, whatever, if it is fraudulent, then that company could lose the merchandise and also have to pay back the original customer. So we kind of like save a lot of people money and businesses money by preventing fraud on these platforms. I think that's probably the coolest thing I've worked on so far. And it's like, there's a lot of like crime that kind of gets avoided because of some of these things too. So
I spent about a year and a half working on a pretty flashy project. It's a startup in Portland called Motorized Precision, and essentially what it is we worked in the film industry, and we had these like 5,000-pound robots that moved at lightning fast speeds. They're made to be welding robots for the film industry, or for the welding robots for the automotive industry. And we were basically taking those robots and we were putting cameras on the end of them, and then we'd like use the robot to move the camera in ways that a human couldn't move a camera. So we would use that to get like CGI shots, and my role was to build the interface between the robot and the filmographer, so that literally like directors could move the robot around with an Xbox controller and plan how it was going to move.
That's so awesome. Like, okay, just from like hearing the word robots, okay, what I thought was like while in college, did you guys like ever join a club where you like build like robots and compete where you fight each other? Is that such a thing?
BattleBots.
Yes. Oh my God, I heard of that. I saw like this movie and it was like so cool. So I was like, is that actually a thing? So like programming robots to like do certain things and fight each other, just designing itself.
I don't think anyone's going to pay you to make a robot to fight other robots. Hopefully not for like another 1,000 years. Maybe that'll be the army of the future. I don't know. However, to be a robotics engineer is a very real career. And yeah, like there was other people on that team whose job was literally to just do the programming on the robots themselves. So that's totally a career that people can do. For that, you have to be an engineer usually as well as a programmer. So it's pretty specialized.
yeah, so that kind of programming is called like embedded programming. So it's basically like embedded systems programming is like a little bit lower level. You have to deal with the memory of the machine, like the physical limitations of the machine that you're talking about, like the robot. Some of my best friends though that are, I mean, really good programmers started doing, I don't know if you ever heard of First Robotics, but they have these certain challenges and things. You basically spend, it's like a high school competition, I think, a nationwide thing, where you have these challenges and you try to program the robot to successfully do something. I think that's a really good avenue into getting into programming. You learn a lot in those kind of real-time situations.
Yeah, just like I took robotics 1, 2 for like freshman year. It was honestly the most challenging thing ever. Like I never expected like coding to be like this and that. But just like hearing you guys talk about like your work and stuff, what makes you so passionate about it?
For me, it's all about creation. I like starting my day with, it's like being a construction worker. Like I start my day with like maybe an empty page, and at the end of the day, it's full of all this cool stuff. And I've been particularly passionate throughout my career doing things like in 3D, like maybe like bringing data to life, like charts and graphs. Making things like that happen has been really fun for me. So for me, I like the flow of sort of having my code on one side and my work on the other, and being able to write and then see the results, and write and see the results. So that's definitely what motivates me to keep going.
For me, at at the beginning of my, or like the earlier, I'm still pretty young, so I think like, you know, the earlier parts of my career, like when I very first was starting, it was definitely just building anything and like having it do what I wanted it to do, and like doing it automated, you know, like making something just automated. What I first started out doing was like financial reporting, and basically just getting, like trying to predict companies' revenue numbers. That's kind of was my first job, and getting that kind of thing to work like on a quarter after quarter basis within a certain window of accuracy is like, that's really satisfying, to be able to predict something like that. And now what motivates me is more like our customers' stories. We actually had a customer who was experiencing an attack from, I guess it was like some kind of operation trying to launder money through their website by basically buying these goods and then like selling them on eBay. And so our program started noticing this, and like noticing this pattern as fraudulent activity, and then basically shut down their ability to do that anymore. And as a result, they were unable to launder their money as quickly. And it ended up getting back to us that it was actually like a sex trafficking circle, and like that's how they were getting their money, you know, clean. So stopping things like that now is like, that's a really cool thing to be a part of. And just hearing stories about how people are using our product is like, I don't know, it's cool to just work on something that like does things like that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I get that. Obviously, you guys have come like so far from just kids from high school wanting to like get into this like college and all that, to being able to like do something of your own. So professionally, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, what steps are you taking to move towards that goal?
So I just started a new job. I'm working on this like open source website that is aimed at helping conservation researchers. And when I signed on, we had a couple thousand people as users across the different websites. And I'm really hoping that, this can grow into a much better, more universal tool that's used by many, many more people and does more for them than it does now.
Nice. For me, I hope within the next 5 years to like have my own business, like something, not necessarily like an app or anything like that, but, and it may not even be software related. I'm not really sure, but I'm kind of into the idea of like starting my own business at some point. So
There's definitely some students in our midst today, right here, who are interested in starting their own business. So I'd love to know, like, if you were to start your own business, where are the holes that are in, if you're going to stick to programming, where are the holes that you see where companies could sprout up easily?
I'm not totally sure. There's a lot of stuff, you know, that's happening all the time. I haven't been as on top of it as I was in the past, like on the startup beat. Yeah, I mean, it can literally be anything, you know, like one time I was in a competition, like they have these things called startup competitions. And they have one in Portland, I know, every year. We competed in it a few years ago, and we built like a web page basically where people could order a cup of coffee and have it delivered to them, like on bike, like anywhere in downtown Portland. And that was just our idea for the weekend. And like, I think we sold, like, we opened up the website on Saturday morning, and we had it open on Saturday and Sunday. And I think we sold over like 120 cups or something like that, which is like, was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So just just, I think anything entrepreneurial, it's more about just taking action and like doing it and getting feedback from your customers. It's not as much about like, you know, this crazy idea that you have that might, you know, may or may not work. I mean, you just want to kind of start with something simple, I think, and see where it goes.
Well, if you still have the code for that, I'm sure it would do really well in this COVID era.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Ben, Scheiner, do you have any holes that you think could be really good for someone to jump into in terms of being entrepreneurial?
I would echo what Ben said. I think that the main thing you want to do as an entrepreneur is you want to put yourself out there. You want to meet people who have needs and really listen to them. You don't want to have your goal already in the back of your mind and say, like, no matter what they say, I'm going to make this and I'm going to make them want it. The way to really have a successful business is to really listen to and understand people.
Absolutely.
Also, I would say that, and this is something that I'm really passionate about, a lot of people are obsessed with the idea of a startup, that if you make a business, it has to have this like crazy exponential growth curve, and you're going to lose a lot of money and you're going to ask for money from all your friends, and then you're going to gain a lot of money and you're going to become the next Facebook in like 5 years. I think that it's really nice when people start businesses that are small and will probably remain small for at least a couple of years and will become important parts of their communities. And, you know, I think that is what people should strive to do.
Absolutely. Definitely a more realistic approach. It's like 1 in a million that potentially will get that Facebook deal kind of thing. I want to shift gears here. I'm going to recognize the fact that us three, Ben, and myself, are all white males. The software industry is a white male dominated industry, and there's a lot of movement to try and get women, students of color, to really accelerate through these programs. Are there any roadblocks that you've seen in ascending in software industry, and are there any suggestions that you can offer for students of color who, or women who can really take advantage of becoming software engineers and really leading in that industry?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that tech companies are really forward thinking, and they're really, really excited to hire women, people of color, anyone who's not a white male. I think that there is one danger that I would caution people of. I've had a lot of like friends who are like female programmers who often will get hired by like really fancy companies like Google or Apple for like $200K a year, like for a lot of money. But then they'll often get like maybe pushed into roles where they're more public facing and maybe like going to conventions all the time and being like, I work for Google, instead of actually working on like core services, which may be a dream job for someone. But it might also not be what you're into. And I've definitely seen people get pushed into that. So basically my advice would be, don't pretend that you're interested in software engineering because you make a lot of money, but if you are into it, you know, even if you're a white male, it's a lucrative thing, but especially if you're a woman or of color, it's a very lucrative place to be. And the world is really your oyster. I don't think you'll encounter a lot of resistance. But I would caution you to be careful of companies that just look to put you sort of on the face of things instead of actually working on core services.
Thanks, Ben. And over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I think I've seen a little bit of what you're talking about as well. I was at a conference this last fall, and I noticed that kind of thing as well. Like, we talked to somebody and they didn't necessarily have the idea about how things worked, but under the covers or whatever. But anyway, I think in general, companies are definitely trying to hire more minorities, more females, because it has proven for them to be, increases like the happiness in the workplace. Everybody's, it creates better solutions to problems, to have a diverse group of people working on a problem and different backgrounds and so forth. So I would be surprised if you got a lot of pushback trying to join into the tech community. I think there are a lot of opportunities out there. Women in tech, Girls Who Code are pretty decent resources, I think, for girls of your age trying to get started in this kind of space. And there are conferences for this kind of thing, definitely in Portland. Even probably in Portland, there might be, aside from COVID stuff, but there could be even like weekly meetups. I know there was one website called Calligator.com, which was like a tech meetup website. I don't know if it's still around, but yeah, I'll post that in chat if it's still up or wherever
awesome.
it is. But yeah, they do a lot of events for all kinds of groups. That's kind of where I found these things like the hackathons. These things are happening all around you. I think your best bet is to just go and get involved and try to meet people in the community, try to get, some relationships built, and people will be excited to have you work on their product. Like I don't know, that people are always excited about their own stuff. So if they can get an extra set of eyes on it, they're always happy for that too. So even if you don't have a lot of experience, that's probably the best way to get started.
The one thing I wish that I had said, and I'll just add it now, is that I do think that there is a challenge, and that is that, like if you go to college and you sign up for like computer science 1 or computer science 2, you might find yourself being like one of like 3 women in a class of 50, or one of like 3 people of color. And, for everyone who starts to program, we have this phrase called imposter syndrome. This idea that you don't belong. And I've had that, like I definitely had that when I was starting my career, but I imagine that that's probably even harder to deal with when you don't look like everyone who's around you. But I would just say that you do belong, and the industry does want you, and the code does not care anything about what color you are or what chromosomes you have. It's just code. So
yeah, I think the imposter syndrome thing is really interesting to touch on. I definitely have spent, when you bite off more than you can chew, especially, you feel like, oh man, what am I thinking? Why am I doing this? There's no way I'm going to be able to solve this problem. You'll always figure it out. There's never a time I've there's never a time I've completely failed at something like that. So, and you can fail, but then you still have tomorrow. You know what I mean? So just be willing to fail. That's like the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Mary just mentioned here, we had a Passion Impact article discussion on imposter syndrome last week. And I thought that was actually pretty coincidental. I'm curious, Mary, is there anything from that article that maybe you have questions about, or you can link to this conversation that you'd like to share? It's okay if you don't want to, I'm just curious. I'm going to unmute you just in case. Go for it, Mary. Is there anything else?
Hello?
Hey.
Hey.
Hello?
Hey, we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't. I was typing that I don't, but you already unmuted me, but yeah, I don't.
Well, what did you read about in that article?
I watched the TED Ed video on it. Yeah.
What did you gain from it?
I didn't know there was a real word for it. I just thought it was like a feeling that people had. But I think it's very like surprising and cool that, everyone has it, even like software engineers, people that are, so like, but yeah, I thought that was very interesting. So I wanted to mention that really quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you definitely have it. Whenever you're doing a new project, like you don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And especially when you're new, when you're like 2 years into it or whatever, like even sometimes I'm sure, that's the thing is now whenever I don't know the answer to something, I know that I have more confidence that I'll be able to figure it out. But that's the only difference. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be faster or anything like that. It's just like the willingness to continue learning and like keep trying to solve problems, basically. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for those. Go for it, Kayla. Sorry.
All right. So yeah, they're in the chat. It seems Ben and Ben have been like adding up like little sources and information you can check out, especially the upcoming events, or like, was it women?
yeah, so on that calligator.org, there's a Women in Tech event. I can't remember what it said. Oh, so it was a Get Hired Up virtual event. So a lot of these are, you know, Python communities, photography, like security focused things, maybe DevOps stuff. They're all kind of like subsections of programming or tech in Portland. But there's a lot of events on there. So if you want to meet people in this scene.
So is there like a age limit that you can like go? Like, is it just like everyone?
It probably depends on the event. I would look at each one. Some of them are definitely going to be like, you know, pizza and beer and hacking or whatever. So maybe maybe that's not the best for everybody. But
there's also a group called Chick Tech, and I can send it out. Chick Tech's a nonprofit organization specifically for Portland youth to get involved in, specifically female youth, female identifying youth. So we can put that out there as well. I think Cameron had a question beforehand. Cameron, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask it. Is that okay? Here we go. Go for it, Cameron.
Wait, hello?
Hey.
Okay. Yeah, so my question is, since everything is like quarantine as of right now, and assuming your work is remote, how do you keep yourself sane as a programmer?
Who said I was sane?
Ah,
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's going a little crazy with the quarantine. I work remote in general, so it's not new to work remote. But I mean, even when I do work remote, I like to go to a coffee shop to mix it up. Like my friends and I will like meet up at someone's house and we'll just like work together for a change of pace. So it is uncomfortable to be in one place. I mean, whenever you're working on a computer, you want to make sure that your back is straight. That's one of the most important things. I can't overstress that enough. And the other thing that I would recommend is training yourself to work on a dimmer screen than you're used to, so to reduce eye strain. So whatever brightness your computer is set to today, you might take that down just one notch, and then maybe a week from now, you'll take it down another notch. And I work on my computer at like literally the minimum brightness before it turns off. I don't know, that seems to help me.
does that help you see at dark?
Totally, maybe.
Christina, good point. Everybody did straighten their backs after he said that. Go for it, Ben Whitehead.
Yeah, for me, it is more, I've done a little bit of remote work as well. So I've, you know, had that experience. Right now I do go into the office typically. But yeah, everybody's remote now. So like I said before, it's a lot of video calls. It's a lot of getting on the computer to figure out what's going on, how to fix whatever problem's happening. And then on top of that, it's a lot of like, I mean, I had this problem for the last company that I worked for, is that I would just work like from 7:30 to 7:30, and then I'd eat dinner, and then I'd like just keep working. Like for some reason, it was just like constantly working. And that was like working for a startup. So the hours were a lot harder. I had a lot more responsibility then as well. So forcing yourself to take breaks, like you have to have these like mental breaks, or you will not be productive and you will burn out. Like there's no question about it. So that's the biggest thing for me, I think, is like making me turn off the laptop at 5:30, go for a walk, eat dinner, you know, cook a good dinner, take your time, you know, and then go to sleep and do it again in the morning. You know, don't get back on the computer right before you go to bed or whatever. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Amen
Yeah.
to that.
All right. So we have a minute left. Do you guys have any final questions? Everybody in chat, just raise your hand or either type before we start our reflection. All right. While they are typing or anything, do you guys have a joke like that is related to engineering or software jokes? All right. Sasha asks, okay, balancing work / relaxing. Oh wait, oh that was a comment.
That's the
Okay,
statement.
yeah, going back to any jokes?
Any jokes? I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of like programmer humor, like anything on Reddit. I don't know. I feel like that's
Right, yeah. So no questions. So everybody can just write in the chat and just like comment in the chat like your reflection. Here's some questions you want to refer to. What did you learn from this interview that you're excited about? 2, how can you use this information moving forward? And 3, how can we as Passion Impact improve your experience? So yeah, just continue writing. And if Ben and Ben has a joke that you guys can share at the end, that'd be awesome.
I feel like a lot of programmer humor is just like sharing like random stuff that you find on the internet, because everyone's on the internet all day, so it's just like stuff getting passed around. There's a lot of jokes related to like languages that like, you know, y'all don't know.
Let me see if I can copy this image to the Zoom chat.
Sasha knows a lot of coding jokes because he tends to bring that up a lot. So Sasha, if you have any jokes, please bring it up.
I feel like are coders more into like memes? Is that a big thing?
Yeah, definitely. Coders definitely do memes. There's so many. I mean, anything. Have you ever heard of the website like XKCD? That's one that
yeah. The
definitely
cartoons?
like. Yeah, cartoons, exactly. That's a good one that has a ton of programmer humor, like just science humor, I guess, in general. But
I've got a final question for you.
there's a
real
lot,
quick.
but a lot of them are very like they're cringy because like only, you know, like they rely on some knowledge about like a programming language or like some nuance about something dumb. I don't know. So they're not always like funny to people that don't do this.
So I have a last question for you before we get some of our reflections in. Did y'all ever code with MySpace? Was that ever something that you did in your life?
I did not.
You did not? Oh, interesting. Okay, so Ben Whitehead, can you tell us a little bit about MySpace and what that was and the coding behind it as people are still filling out their reflections?
Well, MySpace was pretty dope because it was like Facebook, but it was cool because you could like change everything about your profile. Like your profile would be totally different from your friends. There was a default profile, but like not many people would rock the default. Like everybody would at least like put on their own skin or like do like a background image or something like that. But it basically let you do pure CSS and maybe even JavaScript, but definitely CSS and HTML within your own profile. So you could just have crazy stuff on your profile that was kind of cool, make it unique.
Yeah, it was like your own little website.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Actually, that's basically what it is today, your own website. So you could do that now.
Yeah.
All right, Kayla, would you like to read some of these off?
All right. Mary says that I can move forward with this info knowing that it's important to acknowledge that it's okay to not always know the answer to a question.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
Nice, Mary.
Absolutely. Although on your math test, don't put I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Amy Lee says, I learned that programming can be very social. Teamwork is very important in any field. Find ways in any field that requires soft skills and how they compare / contrast. Okay.
Nice, Amy.
Sasha says, I learned that in resumes for programming, it's more important what you know and what have you done rather than where you've worked.
Yeah.
Mary said, ha 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 ha. Sasha said, oh no, oh, not done, XD. Oh.
As more students are filling these out, I want to just focus your attention on the screen. We've got some upcoming events over the next week here. Every Monday, like today, students will chime in. Anya was in there today. Mary was in there today. We're trying to translate all of our promotional information for parents and guardians who don't speak or read English. So if you speak or read Spanish, Cantonese, Russian, or Vietnamese, we would love your help. Kayla, you were in there too. That's every Monday, parent support. On Tuesdays, we have article discussions, just like the one last week where the students talked about, why am I blanking? Impostor syndrome. Thank you. You can learn and discuss these with peers on a more deep level from Tuesdays from 12 to 1. On Wednesdays from 12 to 1, Kayla and Christina are getting it. And the first time that I did it, I had to use my inhaler. It was a little intense. On Mondays and Wednesdays, we have informational interviews. So upcoming this Wednesday, April 13th from 4 to 5 is Brina Cortez. She's actually a board member of Passion Impact. And Ana Mendoza Cruz are going to be talking about cultural youth services. They both work with high schools and then a whole slew of other students. On Thursdays, we have the Connectors Communication Team. If you're interested in joining that to learn about newsletters, blogs, vlogs, press releases, and more, that's Thursdays from 3 to 4, and you do need to apply to be part of that one. And then on Fridays, you get to hang out with Alan and Mary and Alan from 12 to 1, play games, just chill. It's a great time. If you are interested in any of those, at the top of the page here, you can register, passionimpact.org/teleprogramming. And if you'd like to subscribe to our student-run newsletter, down at the bottom, passionimpact.org/subscribe. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Kayla?
No, actually. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's give
Ben.
If our bouncer can unmute everybody, we can give Ben and Ben some applause. And also, Kayla, way to go on your first interview.
Yeah.
Kayla.
Thank you.
Join us, guys.
Woo. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time, y'all.
Hopefully that's helpful. I'll put my email. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to get in touch. And since everyone's so interested in the back stuff, I do want to say one thing about that. Usually the reason that your back is slouched is because your computer is way lower than your head. So your head has to look down at it. So the solution is to raise your computer.
Dang.
Oh.
Ooh. I feel like I've been exposed. I'm going to fix my back.
That's fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks, y'all. Have a great evening. Go outside, turn your computers off. Outside, I mean, like, not outside.
No,
like,
not outside, yeah.
Don't, like, go, yeah, you know, just
Yeah.
like maybe in your vicinity kind of thing.
Yeah, 2020.
Right.
Yeah, see you guys.
All right. See you.